Hi, everyone. This is Tom Salemi. Welcome to the Device Talks weekly podcast. We're going to use this episode as a post-game show for our Device Talks Boston meeting, which happened last week in Boston. We recorded a lot of this episode at the end of last week, a few days after the event. So you'll hear from Executive Editor Chris Newmarker, Senior Editor Daniel Kirsch, and Associate Editor Sean Hooley. They'll share their takes on the Device Talks Boston experience. And a little later on, we will hear my keynote interview with Eric Benjamin. He's Executive Vice President of Innovation, Strategy, and Digital Products at Insulet. He opened up day two, and we had a great conversation about Insulet, about Omicron, and about where MedTech is headed in relation to consumer tech. So great conversation with Eric. Very grateful that he came down. I also I wanted to take this moment to thank all the companies that helped make Device Talks Boston possible. The sponsors I've mentioned, but they're an integral part. Does not happen without them. But we had so many of our medical device community step up and contribute great content to this event. We had presentations by Abbott, by Boston Scientific, by Corindus, by DePuy Synthes, by Medtronic, and by Stryker. They actually put on full presentations. They had great speakers come down and talk about elements of their business, and each of the sessions were jam-packed. So I know their efforts were well rewarded. And again, I'm grateful for them for contributing their conversations and their thoughts. Grateful to all the other companies that have provided speakers, too many to name. We had over 100 speakers there. Grateful to MedTech Innovator. We'll talk about them a little later, but this really felt like a community effort, and I still have great feelings walking away from it. So thank you to everyone who participated and who contributed. It does not go unnoticed on this end of this event. It does not happen without the MedTech community. So thanks to all who were there, and thanks, of course, to all who said hello, who were attending and stopped and said hello and told us if they were enjoying the show or not. And I'm happy to say most of them did. Before we begin this episode, though, a few important notes. We have a Device Talks Tuesday coming up on Tuesday at 4 p.m. It's called The Future of Digital Case Support, a Teleflex case study. It's a conversation between Teleflex and Explorer Surgical. We'll have founder and general manager of Explorer Surgical, Jennifer Freed, on, along with Mark Bolton, who is Senior Clinical Affairs Manager of Interventional Urology at NeoTrack/Teleflex, now Teleflex. And they'll have a great conversation as to how Teleflex is using Explorer Surgical technology to help its sales teams to ease communication. So definitely check that out. You can go to DeviceTalks.com to register. Explorer Surgical, of course, is now a GHX company. And I have a second piece, and unfortunately, this is a bit of bad news. We have decided to postpone Device Talks Minnesota. There was a feeling that the numbers were not where we wanted them to be to make it a robust event. So we will give it a full court press in 2023. We are working on Device Talks West. That's happening on October 19th and 20th. That'll be in Santa Clara. So keep your eyes peeled for updates to that agenda. Actually, I'll put up an early agenda probably in a month or so. We have some keynotes up there already. You can go find all of that at DeviceTalks.com. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to bring in our episode sponsor, Deep Dive. I'm speaking with Bill Park, the CEO of Deep Dive. Bill, tell us about the origins of Deep Dive.
Hey, Tom. So Deep Dive, we're a technology company based here in Silicon Valley. We were started by two scientists who had gotten their PhDs at Berkeley and joined startup biotech companies in the Bay Area and found that they couldn't have easy access to scientific papers, at least not easy that was also affordable. So at Deep Dive, we created a platform designed specifically for scientists and small to medium-sized organizations that give them a one-stop platform to access and manage all their scientific literature.
We'll hear more from Bill Park a little later in the podcast. If you want more information about Deep Dive, you can go to deepdive.com. That's spelled DeepDyve.com. And we'll have some information for you a little later in the podcast about how you can get a free trial. Now, let's begin this episode of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, man. It's been a week. It's been a week,
and the whole gang is here. We have senior editor Danielle Kirsch. Hello, Danielle.
Hi, Tom. Again.
We just saw each other 2 days ago, and here we are on the Zoom call again. And we have associate editor Sean Hooley. Sean, welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah. How are we all feeling 2 days after Device Talks Boston, which was an enormous success? Where is our energy level at, Sean? 1 to 5, 5 being Sonic the Hedgehog, fast kind of stuff. Speaking your lingo, right? You're a Sonic guy, I imagine.
I believe it or not, I used to be. So sure, we can.
Where's your energy level at?
I would give it a 2.5.
Whoa!
Considering it was a -3 the other day, feeling pretty good. Well rested as can be.
And Danielle, how about you? 1 to 5.
I'd say about the same. I was able to take a nap yesterday right before I went to bed. So
those pre-bedtime naps are always helpful. And Chris, you're still young, man. How you feeling?
Yeah, I'll go with them. 2.5. I'm drinking another cup of coffee right now. Maybe I'll get up to 3. I finally had a good night's sleep last night. I managed to have the airline flight from hell.
Oh, that's right.
Twice,
that's right.
To Boston and back. It just was, delightful. But
you were Dorothy Newmarker. You were just getting spun around by tornadoes.
Yeah, exactly. Especially on the way back, we had a nice tornado warning in Minneapolis. So I got to, travel down to Madison. And then, after refueled, we headed out to Sioux Falls and followed the storm from behind, So I had 2 experiences of dragging myself into where I was going, 1, 2 in the morning. But, hey, got a good night's sleep. And I'm still, I have to say, of all the things, both of those airline flights, after all that, I still think it was worth it to be a Device Talks Boston. I'm still feeling the glow from just what a great show that was. It was just awesome.
It was a terrific show. The 3 shows combined had close to 3,000 attendees. I think we were 50% over our last show in 2019, 50% attendance. And man, it was just great to actually see folks in person after connecting with them on Zoom or hearing them or talking to them for the podcast.
Yeah.
It felt almost like a reunion of sorts, which is kind of what I felt it would be like going in.
It seriously was, even for our team. I mean, we saw each other in Minnesota last year, but Sean and Danielle, I haven't seen you in person since the pandemic started. So it was really great. And, glad we got to hang out together in person. And, I got to remind myself again that, lobster rolls in Boston, really are a lot better than Minneapolis.
That's not lobster they're giving you in Minneapolis, Chris.
Yeah, I probably not. Yeah, probably.
No, it was great to see to get the entire MedTech gang together, and I think people were very kind with their comments about what we're doing here with the podcast and with our efforts over the last 2 years to keep people connected. I heard a lot of great thank yous, and I know there were some fans out there. Sean, you got the comment. What was it? You're younger than you sound. Was that the comment?
I was told I was younger than expected, but it was just nice to be recognized for the occasional appearance. Tom, you were the star of the show. Everyone.
Yes.
Everyone was praising you.
It was Chris Newmark. I think someone came up to you and said, "What are the newsmakers this week, Chris?" And you're like, "I don't know yet. It's only Wednesday."
I'm busy covering a show, so.
But that was awesome. It's great. It's great that people are enjoying what we're doing here because we clearly are. And
I was at awe at your fan club though, Tom. Gosh, the Tom Salemi fan club.
I'm blushing now.
Yeah, this
is not a Zoom filter.
And when you arrived there, it was like the Beatles. It was like the Beatles and 65 all over again, man. It was just
That's right. Well, thank you to everyone who did say hello to us and stopped us to say hi. It was very energizing, despite our 2 to 3 energy points.
Yes.
That's what kept us going. I think just the friendly faces and the connection with folks. So thank you to everyone who did reach out, and we can't wait to get the whole gang together as well.
Yeah, it'll be great. And when is Device Talks Boston next year? We're all set to do this, right?
That's right.
We're doing this.
Save the date, May 10th and 11th.
All right.
happening same days, well, same dates, different date. You know how the calendar works. It's the same. Yeah. We all are. But May 10th and 11th at the BCEC. So folks should certainly save the date. And promise we will do everything we can to make it bigger and better than this year's, and that is saying something. So it's going to be fantastic.
Onward and up there. Be there. Be square.
That's right. You're already calling them out, Chris Newmarker. I like it. Be there or be square.
That's right.
That's right. A lot of cool people in Boston. But anyway, we had a lot of news as well. So we're going to dedicate this week's newsmakers to the news that came out of DeviceTalks Boston. Sean and Jim Hammerand and Chris, I believe you sent some content out.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we've got some articles there. Some articles we'll sort of identify the top 5. Lots of love on LinkedIn, which was fantastic. It was great to reach people outside of the conference, and we'll go through the top 5 newsmakers that appeared on the pages of Mass Device and our other pubs, and then we'll all kind of choose our 1 or 2 personal newsmakers from the conference. Things that's the amazing thing. I see the great content coming out that you all wrote, and then I just know how much more there was. You can only write so much, right? Yeah. So
it was like a fire hose of like information, like some like really cool stuff coming out of the conference.
Yeah. So if you're following the conference through our pages, you're getting as good a glimpse as you're going to get, but it is a glimpse, it's just a fraction. So if
you have a slight feeling you missed out.
Yes, Amanda De Palma, one of our sort of advisors. She helped with a lot of recruitment of speakers, but was not able to make the event. And she posted on LinkedIn that she was getting some serious FOMO, which is the kindest thing you can say to a conference organizer. So there was some fear of missing out. So I hope people don't miss out next year, May 10th and 11th. Now let's take a break from this podcast to bring back our sponsor, Deep Dive. I'm here with CEO Bill Park. Bill, how does Deep Dive work with the medical device industry?
The medical device is one of our largest sectors because it has a lot of the characteristics of where there is the market need. These tend to be small to medium-sized organizations, even startups, where there's a need for a really diverse amount of research, from engineering, applied materials, and high-tech type of research, all the way into the life sciences and into the biology and chemistry and other related subjects. So they really represent, in some cases, the real sweet spot of need, where there's a diverse set of researchers that need a diverse set of journals, and to try and pay for all those journals individually would be just the cost would be exorbitant. Further to that, because these are organizations that are R&D driven, there's a really strong need for the researchers to be collaborating and organizing the work that they do together. And so our sweet spot really are not just med device companies, but also just any organization that has a strong emphasis in R&D as part of their lifeblood and strategy. And typically our clients range from anywhere from 20 employees up to 1,000. Those seem to represent the companies where there's a strong R&D intent, but where they may not have quite the scale to get access to all the literature that they may need.
In our next and final interview with Bill Park, we'll hear how Deep Dive can help researchers and R&D folks collaborate. If you'd like to find out more about Deep Dive, you can go to deepdive.com. That's once again spelled deep, DYVE.com. And if you'd like to try Deep Dive out, go to this website, get.deepdive.com/DeviceTalks. So once again, it is get.deepdive.com/DeviceTalks. And again, Deep Dive is spelled DEEPDYVE. Go to that website. You can sign up for a free trial with Deep Dive. What is number 5 on your vaunted DeviceTalks Boston's newsmakers list?
Well, number 5 on the list, we originally were going to have Insulet CEO Shacey Petrovich speak at the show, but she had to change her plans at the last minute because she's planning to leave the company because she has some things with family she needs to focus on. But the person they sent in her stead, Eric Benjamin, Executive Vice President of Innovation innovation and strategy. Just gave a really good talk of where the company is going, and what's how, and especially because he's in charge of of product development to a degree at the company. He's got a good a really good view of where we're going to see the Omnipod technology out of Insulet evolve, and Sean covers this space a lot more than I do at this point, and wrote an article off of his talk. I mean, Sean, what were the biggest takeaways that you got out of that?
Yeah, the biggest takeaways were just obviously the Omnipod 5 that was cleared by the FDA earlier this year. It's the latest generation of their technology, and basically the way he described it as far as product development was just how can we simplify this to the point where the user needs to do as little as possible to get their insulin delivered. And so it was interesting to hear it laid out in that way, and also to hear him talk about how they meet at the intersection of consumer devices and medical devices. That was my favorite quote from the chat. And I know, Tom, you did the interview, so maybe I can kick it to you to hear what you thought about it too. But that was the most interesting. Was he said we live at the intersection of consumer technology and medical technology.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at your LinkedIn post with the photo, which, by the way, I didn't realize I was showing so much leg there. So I'm sorry, folks. My pant leg had ridden up a little bit. But
you gotta get longer socks, Tom.
By the way, I sent the photo to Jim Hammerand, and he said you look like Tony Stark.
Nice, I like that.
I will take Tony Stark.
Are you Iron Man, Tom?
I am Iron Man. But the quote you had is, well, I remember I asked him, are you now kind of moving from medical devices into consumer devices? And he said they are medical devices. They are also consumer devices. We live at the intersection of those two things. Diabetes is such a personal experience, and decisions are influenced by the care team, but the ultimate choice is made by the person with diabetes. That's central to how we think about it. So I think insulin's just a great example of how medtech is becoming more personalized and more patient-centric.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see where they're going with insulin, but also I was actually unaware about their drug delivery deal with Amgen for another space. So they're looking into other drug delivery as well, which is fascinating. One of those situations when you ask a question and he said, well, I'm sure you're aware. And I wasn't actually aware of that.
I had a lot of moments in the show. I was like, I didn't know that. Now I know.
Yeah. But Eric Benjamin did a great job kicking off day 2. We're grateful for his willingness to come down and take Shacey Petrovic's place. And as I think we've said before, we wish Shacey Petrovic well. She's a force, and I'm sure we'll be seeing her running another company in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, what is number 4 on this amazing list?
Well, number 4 on the list, I got a story posted off of the day 1 keynote opener, from Harvard's engineering school dean. Frank Doyle, and then thanks to MDO managing editor Jim Hammerand then for taking the audio, getting a transcript, fleshing this out, so it was an even meatier story later in the day. We really had a awesome team effort. That's something I haven't seen in other B2B media companies that were doing well here. Is we had a show, we were getting stories and content out as the show was going on. We don't wait a few days. We get the news out and we were posting stuff on LinkedIn. But Doyle's talk, it was just really fascinating. I thought that it was kind of the phrase he had was that Harvard's actually had an engineering program, since the early 1800s, but he called it kind of like a well-kept secret historically. And Harvard's really upping the game in that school, over the last decade. They just got a 500,000 square foot new science and engineering complex up. And this was news to me. The news was out there, but I hadn't known of this, was that they're getting a little, getting some Facebook money, or, actually Meta money, I guess you'd say. Now that's almost a tongue twister, meta money. But we had there was a $500 million gift from Priscilla Chan and Mark Zuckerberg for a institute that's going to be studying the human brain and drawing lessons from the human brain in order to boost artificial intelligence. And the engineering school has a really good med tech focus. Doyle himself was an artificial pancreas pioneer. So, I mean, I think that those AI insights that are going to be coming out of that institute, I mean, it's work studying the brain to further AI, and then, that AI is going to be, boosting medical technology as well. So, I mean,
we actually talked to a fellow, I'm drawing a blank on his last name. His first name is Nicky. He listens to the podcast, and he travels around Asia. So he says if we get plays from distant countries, it's probably him listening to the podcast. But he had pointed out that Harvard's medical school already has a biomed program. But the last point I took away from Frank Doyle's talk with Peter Stebbins, who had been on the podcast a couple of times, was that they're really trying to align the engineering school with the medical school and share resources, and really they definitely see what Stanford is doing, although they wouldn't use the word Stanford. They didn't name it by name. They definitely see what that university in Palo Alto is doing as a model for where they want to be. So
breaking down silos and collaborating, and
exactly. Yeah.
Be nice. You'll have,
Great. Yeah, no, it would be great for future Device Talks Bostons to have a source of entrepreneurs and startups coming from the Harvard Paulson School. So looking forward to that. All right, Chris, what is number 3 on this New Marketers Newsmakers list?
Well, number 3 on the list. I mean, we closed out day 1 with a talk from a whole host of Stryker leaders, about how they see the company innovating and where it's going, and our Jim Hammeran again, he's out in Seattle, and he wrote a nice collection of highlights from that talk. But what stuck out most to you, Tom?
From that talk, that Spencer Stiles could have my job in a second if he wanted to. that he was very good at moderating, but that's not a surprise. You can't do what you're doing, not be good at leading conversations. But I guess the comments by Dave Lively of Vocera, sort of coming in from a technology industry, and comparing that to his experience at a medtech company. And just his comment, I think that made a lot of people chuckle, was at some of these larger companies, if you're an agent of change and you're trying to ultimately change how they're doing business by bringing in new technology, that he said there are antibodies in all big organizations that attack you like you're a virus and try to slow you down and stop you. And you need to work toward moving against that and defeating that. And the takeaway was that Stryker, while committed to change, still, like any big organization, has some momentum that needs to be shifted in a different direction. So it was a very, I thought, good and frank conversation about where they've been and what they now have and where they're going to go. So I thought all of the panelists did a great job.
Yeah, I think it just shows the strength of a company when, the people inside can be, can have an honest take of what's going well, what's not. They've got that confidence. That's really, really awesome. I was struck by, Robert Cohen, the president of Stryker's Digital Robotics Enabling Technologies organization. I mean, he had one quote that just kind of drove home, kind of that change that we're seeing in the medical device industry right now, where he was Stryker's no longer just a metal on plastic in a box type of company. And, it's really true. I mean, you're not just selling devices or implants anymore. You're really trying to have offerings that are really offering this whole host of products and services to better, treat, different conditions. So I think, I thought that was really useful. And I was struck by, Tracy Robertson, their VP of Digital, was really, driving home that, cybersecurity is an issue, which I don't think has been taken seriously enough yet in the industry. It's we write scary cybersecurity stories on Mass Device, and the clicks just don't happen. People are there's hackers out there, I know, but she was, Tracy was even, saying that what's going on right now is going to lead to more government regulation, because it's you don't want somebody. You don't want ransomware on your pacemaker. You don't want
right.
You don't want to be getting ready to go under the knife to have your knee replaced, and the robot shuts down because there's some hacker shenanigans going on. So.
And then the final panelist was Siddharth Satish. He is Vice President of Digital Innovation for Surgical Technologies, and he had been part of Gauss that was acquired. And that's using AI technology to examine what are they? Would they be sponges in the OR that absorb the blood, and they can sort of determine how much blood has been lost during a procedure?
Yeah, that was fascinating. He said there's a little bit of AI almost in every part of our business. I mean, that's pretty wild. The machines are taking over, Tom.
Can we blame them?
Yeah, right.
But great job by Stryker. Really grateful that they filled that final keynote slot, and it was really well attended and really should have been, because it was a fascinating conversation. All right, Chris, what is number 2 on the new markets?
Number 2 on the list. This is another really good article from Sean, how technology is changing the operating room, and tell us a little bit about what you found out at the show.
It's a good segue from the last one, because Siddhar Satish was also on this panel talking about GOS, which he founded before Stryker acquired it, and it's real-time monitoring for blood loss using an iPad as the hardware. And so that was kind of the conversation was about this mix of hardware, software in the OR. There's a lot of talk about sort of a uniform manner in which to approach it, and how everyone needs to understand how this it's not just about compiling the data in the OR. It's about having sort of a means to an end for that data. It was a really interesting panel with Proximity CEO Nadine Hashash-Haram, Active Surgical CEO Todd Usen, Satish, and Avail Med Systems CEO Daniel Hawkins. Bill Benton moderated it. And yeah, it was really intriguing, just the conversations about where data goes and where they see the future of the OR going, and how vital these sort of improvements in technology are going to be. And like Usen gave one of the quotes I liked the most, which was, "Data is only good as the insights that are derived from it." So I thought that was the biggest takeaway, was that they want a real application of the data. It's so great to be able to have this technology in the OR, but what you're doing with it is really the most important thing, which seems simple, but as they explained it, it was not as simple as it would be on the surface.
Yeah, one of the tragedies of planning a conference like this is you organize all these great panels and you're excited to hear them, and then you realize the week before, when you're assigning rooms, and you realize you're moderating a session in another room at the same time this panel's having, like, oh no, I'm not gonna see this panel. I wanted to see Chris, your atrial fibrillation panel. I missed that. I missed a lot of the show, and it just makes me sad.
It was hard writing on this panel because it was, 45 minutes, hour long conversation, and trying to boil it down. And essentially, there's a lot more that they talked about that I couldn't squeeze into an article without making it a book. So
yes,
right. You don't want to break the internet, for sure. If you weren't there, you missed a lot. That with the supply chain panel that I moderated was fascinating. We'll talk about Chris's field ablation model in a few minutes, but a lot going on that we're not going to hit upon in this top 5. We had great sessions put on by Medtronic, by Corindus, the Health and Ears company, by DePuy. Their session was packed. We'll talk about Abbott a little bit later, Boston Scientific a little bit later, but so many great sessions and presenting companies. So I'm grateful to all the medical device companies that stepped up and really contributed some fascinating and important and valuable conversations to DeviceTalks Boston.
Hey, are we ready for number 1 though? Number 1.
We are ready for number 1.
I mean, number 1 on the list is the MedTech Innovator pitch contest. I mean, man, that took DeviceTalks Boston to a new level. Yeah, no, it was great. I mentioned on LinkedIn that when we were planning, actually when I was planning DeviceTalks Minnesota, my first call went to Paul Grant because I wanted to get MedTech Innovator involved. This was in 2020. And then when that went south, we moved it forward to our first event, which I'm glad was in Boston because it was a perfect fit. And you're right, they brought not only great energy, but great companies to present. They brought great, the judges were senior executives at medical device companies. They came and they were down on the exhibit floor, sitting on large round tables, interviewing each of the startups. And it just brought, like you said, another level of energy and enthusiasm. And I think just really is a different perspective. These were mid-stage companies. These were not early stage startups. So these were companies that were legitimate, that had money to spend. And I think our vendors on the exhibit floor, our sponsors on the exhibit floor, appreciated it as well. There was every time I went to the exhibit floor, there was a lot of energy, a lot of people walking around. The fact that, there were a lot of people walking around the expo floor. Like, I think between, this podcast and, MedTech Innovator, we really had a nice large crowd of industry insiders from the big companies, there. And, and then having that combo of, having people from these younger companies there. And, then we had that whole supplier ecosystem there on the exhibitor floor. I mean, man, we just brought it together. It was the best DeviceTalks Boston ever, at least as far as audience and content. It was the best ever. I mean, so and ultimately the winner of the pitch competition have we reported on that yet?
Yes, we did. We've, actually, Jim Hammerand is getting an article out about that today. But we had the news out right away on LinkedIn, around the show, and the winner was this was really what was fascinating too about this. This was intense competition. I mean, they started out with like 1,000 applicants. I mean, they were doing like pitch rounds over and over and over. I mean, they whittled that down before the show, and they were doing pitch rounds over and over again. And then we right near the end of the show, we had like 4 finalists, deliver their final pitches in front of the judges, get questions by the judges, audience vote kicking in. I mean, man, and all those 4 companies were they all were like legitimately like, wow, there's a need here. There's a market. This sounds like really interesting technology. I mean, one that didn't win for crying out loud had an experiment that was going up on the International Space Station.
Wow.
You said on Musk's rocket, like it's going to be like a SpaceX rocket taking their experiment to the space station, and they didn't win. I mean, that just shows how amazing these technologies were. And then, the winner was a company called DermaSensor that has kind of like the sensor doctors can use to better spot like skin lesions that might be cancerous, which is could be a huge benefit because when you go to a primary care doctor, I mean they know how to spot a skin lesion that's potentially cancerous, but not to the level of somebody who's a dermatologist. And so for them to have that extra help, to find, those potentially dangerous skin lesions and then forward you to a dermatologist who could, really figure out, whether, you're in trouble early. Technology has a lot of potential. It said something, I posted something on LinkedIn right away about them winning the competition, and somebody who, had lost a mother to skin cancer, commented right away and was like, this is a really important technology.
Danielle, you were there in the first session, I think, when MedTech Innovator opened up. It seemed to be a jam-packed room throughout. How was the opening session?
It was good. There was lots of good conversation, and of course, just like a lot of our other panels, it had good attendance. So it was cool to just see it progress throughout the show, and then go to the pitch competition at the end. So.
No, excellent. Well, we're very happy to have MedTech Innovator as part of the show, and we're hopeful that, and I think they're planning to be back at DeviceTalks Boston next year. So looking forward to that. And we're here again with Bill Park. Bill, I know Deep Dive has been called the Spotify of research papers, but you've mentioned how Deep Dive goes far beyond just providing information as Spotify provides music. Tell us a bit more about what Deep Dive is able to do.
What's changed for us in more recent times is that as that database has grown, today it's over 25 million papers, over 20,000 journals. The only way to access these journals in this type of fashion would be to pay and subscribe journal by journal, which for any small to medium-sized organization, it would be out of the question for them. What's changed for us is that as we've begun working with more of these organizations, particularly some of the larger ones within our portfolio, the need for workflow has really become pronounced. That what we were finding is effectively each scientist was doing their research almost independently, even though they were part of a team. Mm-hmm. They were reading papers, taking notes, organizing the things that they were doing, all by themselves. No one else in the team had any real visibility into what else was being read, what else was being searched on, what notes were being taken, what tags or sort of metadata was being added to an article. Where was that article even being stored? And so as a result, there was a lot of waste. There was a lot of waste of buying multiple papers, reading the wrong paper, or the waste of opportunity and not knowing that there were these insights being captured by one scientist that were not being shared to the rest of the team. So last year, we took what was this Spotify database and we basically expanded it into being not just a database, but really being a platform, a one-stop cloud-based platform for scientists to log in and to then access and also organize and collaborate all around the literature all together. It was taking what were a lot of independent individual activities and putting that all into one platform where people can now work together. And I would say that the change and how clients have been referring to Deep Dive has gone from being Spotify for research. Now it's sounding more like Salesforce for research, more of this, CRM equivalent, all for researchers and scientists.
Fantastic. Bill Park, thank you for joining us on the podcast. Thank you, Deep Dive, for sponsoring. Once again, if you'd like to try out Deep Dive, use this special URL. It is get.deepdive.com/DeviceTalks. Once again, that is get.deepdive.com/DeviceTalks. And again, Deep Dive is spelled DeepDyve. Check it out. It's very cool. Now I'd like to queue up our day 2 keynote interview that I did with Eric Benjamin. Eric, again, is the Executive Vice President of Innovation, Strategy, and Digital Products at Insulet.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you for having me. It's
pleasure.
Wonderful to be back in the vibrant Boston area med tech community after doing all these things on Zoom screens.
Yeah, right? No, I know. It's been rather surreal to see people and to see how they measure up to their screen images. Like, oh, you're taller than I thought, and you're shorter than I thought, and you're exactly what I thought. So it's been fun confirmation. But so I normally like to start these conversations learning about someone's path into med tech, and I do want to get there, but let's just clear the issue. Shacey Petrick, your CEO, announced last week that she was going to be stepping down to tend to family. If you could shed some light on the decision, but more importantly, I'd like to sort of understand what the impact of that sort of news is on a company and how you move forward from there.
Yeah. So look, I think one of the things that made Shacey an incredible leader for Insulet and a passionate advocate for people with diabetes is that she lived her values. And, so of course we're saddened to see Shacey move on from Insulet, but we also have to celebrate the choice that she made. She wants to give 110% to whatever she does, and there were people in her life who needed more of her than she could give while she was leading us. And so she made that choice. And we're also thrilled that we're going to be joined by Jim Hollingshead starting June 1st, who's been on our board helping shape our strategy. I know Jim very well because we've collaborated over the last couple of years on our innovation roadmap and corporate strategy. And he's going to be a phenomenal leader for Insulet. And we have an incredibly exciting 2022 and many years ahead, and Jim's going to help us execute on that and keep going.
That's great. Now, Shacey clearly brings great energy to Insulet as CEO. I'm curious, how does the CEO's sort of feeling of what a culture should be, how does that take root in a company? And does that sort of remain the same when they move on? Or do you expect there might be some changes to culture just with someone new at the helm?
Yeah, Tom, it's a great question. Culture is multifaceted, and it's contributed to by so many parts of the organization. The one thing that is singular about Insulet that every new employee, everybody who comes to visit our offices that probably came through in the video, is just our incredible passion for improving the lives of people with diabetes and our mission focus. And Shacey brought her energy to that in her way, and Jim's going to bring his energy to that in his way. But it's really something that we all live and that we all embrace, and that's not changing. That's the passion that it takes in order to build something like Omnipod 5, and it's been in Insulet's DNA for 20 years. And so, leaders come and refine it slightly, but I think, we continue to build on our strengths and from a culture perspective to keep improving the lives of people with diabetes.
I think everyone in medtech, I should hope most people in medtech, come to it with a level of passion to help patients to develop products that make people recover from injury or disease. diabetes is no exception. What I think is exceptional about the diabetes space is that the level of energy that comes from the patients themselves, how engaged they are. Every time I post about a diabetes company, I don't just hear from folks in the industry, I hear from patients who are listening to my podcast or our podcast who are following the news, who share news with me that I didn't know, or you should ask about this, or you should ask about that. What's it like working in a space where the people you're serving are so engaged and interested and educated on what you're doing?
Another great question. So, I started my career in coronary devices, drug-coated stents, and I've connected with that mission. But it's, almost an order of magnitude more at a place like Insulet for exactly the reasons that you're describing. We all hear from our users. Many of us listen to calls with our customers. And it helps, keep all of the decisions that we have to make totally front and center from, whether we're making business decisions, innovation decisions. It's part of what contributes to the DNA of a place like Insulet, is that we are all even closer to the people we serve as a result of that engagement that you're talking about. I hear from our users on LinkedIn all the time asking for product features and asking me when they're going to get things. And it helps humanize what we do in a way that we all appreciate. But when there's not an HCP or there's not a surgeon or there's not another professional between the product and the end user, it just brings it home in ways that are truly unique in diabetes.
That's great. Now, I want to explore that. I love the impact that social media has had on what you do, but also on all of us for the last 2 years. I mean, it's been a lifeline. Zoom calls and LinkedIn have kept us all going. But let's delve a little more into your path. How did you find your way into the medtech industry? What was your first entry?
Yeah, so my first entry was into drug-coated stents. So I came straight out of college. Like lots of folks in college, I had diverse interests, and it was actually a mission that grabbed me. I was I was an engineer by training, was looking at consulting jobs, high-tech, banks, and went for an interview with a little company called Guidant that these days few people have heard of, and was struck in my 3 interviews with them that these are a bunch of people who really care, and what they're doing is also really cool. And so a couple hours later, I decided, okay, I'm going to go into med device. I don't know what that is, but like anybody coming out of college, I'm going to go do that. And it was a great journey. One funny story. I began my career sort of orbiting manufacturing. R&D, process development, quality, manufacturing. And I actually met my wife in a clean room where we were gowned head to toe. So this is the early days of drug-coated stents, where Guidant hadn't figured out what we needed yet to keep our employees safe or to keep the quality of the product. And so we overdid it on the gowning. So we were all wearing full bunny suits.
So it was not love at first sight?
No, it was not love at first sight. It was sort of a true test of some of the other elements that turn out to be enduring in a long-term relationship on collaboration and communication and other things. So
that's outstanding. It's a running gag of mine. Every time I talk to someone who worked at Guidant, Guidant had a special culture, and maybe it becomes more special over time because it's not with us anymore. But I've never found anyone who has nothing but glowing things to say about the time there and the things they've learned. Are you going to be the exception to the rule?
I'm not going to be the exception to the rule. I think it was a very special place, and as I said, I think in many respects, like Insulet, it just grabbed you.
Yeah.
It just grabbed you that this is a place of people who care, and Insulet has exactly the same effect on people. When people come interview with us, when people walk into our offices and see pictures of potters like we just saw in that video, it just grabs you. Like, this place is different. This is a group of people who really want to make a difference in the world.
So do you really use the term potters every day in the office? Is that the term for users?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I don't know if it was
that's who they are.
Yep.
They'll self-describe as potters, and we call them potters.
That's great to give them that connection to your product. What was your introduction to Insulet?
There were some folks who I'd worked with at Abbott who'd found their way to Insulet, and they knew that I'd moved to Boston from the West Coast, and they called me up and they said, Eric, we're at this little company, this is 7 years ago now, we're at this little company, and you won't believe what they do. They make Swiss watches that we have to be able to make it a cost that users can afford to throw them away every 3 days. Do you want to come join us? And I said, that sounds nuts, but yes, I do. And anybody who is a serious engineer who's taken apart a pod, it's a little bit love at first sight. There's just an extraordinary amount of technology in every pod. And when I first got acquainted with it and I looked at what the team had done, and this was 7 years ago, there's an extraordinary amount of technology in the pod. And it was a whole journey to design it. It was another journey to learn to make it at scale and produce it at the quality levels required to serve our podders in the way that they deserve. And so, anyway, I got acquainted with Insulet, fell in love with the technology and the mission, and the rest is history.
Let's give a little product overview of Omnipod 5 for those who may not be familiar with everything it can do. How does it function? Tell us a bit about the product.
Yeah. So I think most folks probably know there's about 2 million folks in the US who live with type 1 diabetes, and another 2 million or thereabouts of folks who live with insulin-intensive type 2 diabetes. And those who live with either of those require insulin replacement therapy in order to meet their basic metabolic requirements. So the standard of care today, 100 years after the discovery of insulin, remains multiple daily injections. So most folks who live with diabetes are injecting themselves 3 to 5 times per day. In addition to that, they're making something like 300 decisions about their disease every day. So they're trying to decide what's going to happen to me if I exercise. What am I going to go low if I go speak at a conference?
I was going to say
and get stressed, high or low.
What would your thought process have been before coming up here? Do you think, if you were to have diabetes, did I eat this?
Yeah, if I were a person with diabetes who had been sort of planning to come and speak here, I would have been thinking hours ago, what am I going to eat this morning? Yep. What am I going to need in terms of insulin on board? Where are my rescue carbs in case I go low and need some glucose right before I'm going to get on stage? Definitely be careful with the coffee because that could spike my blood sugar and I could end up uncomfortable while on stage. It's just a constant overhead people with diabetes are managing. And again, folks with insulin-dependent diabetes don't have a choice. They need insulin. And again, standard of care is 3 to 5 injections a day. And Omnipod solves many of those challenges and dramatically reduces the burden for people with diabetes. So the pod, which you saw in the video, is a small device, a little smaller than a box of Tic Tacs, with an adhesive pad on the back. It can be worn anywhere that you'd take an injection. Automatically inserts a cannula virtually painlessly, and then it delivers background insulin, and users interact with it with a controller, now with Omnipod 5 on a compatible smartphone. And it eliminates 3 to 5 injections a day, takes care of many of those decisions that we were just talking about, and that's Omnipod. Omnipod 5, which you saw in the video, takes all of that to a whole nother level of simplification. So with Omnipod 5, it's the world's first tubeless automated insulin delivery system, which means it connects to a continuous glucose monitor and personalizes therapy in real time. And it's also the first automated insulin delivery system that can be fully controlled via a compatible smartphone. And so 2 huge sources of burden. The first, thinking about what's going to happen to blood sugar, that's automated with Omnipod 5. And the need to take out and carry a separate device, also gone, because folks can use a compatible smartphone in order to control the system. So it's truly an extraordinary technology, and you saw the smiling faces in the video. The feedback in our first few months of launch has been extraordinary.
What are the considerations when you're developing a device that can be controlled by the patient, by the user? We had a conversation yesterday, different product. It was a heart pump and LVAD, and the surgeon on there said, someday we'd love to get to the point where you could almost adjust it so these were young kids who had the pumps, but they could get more blood when they needed it. And that was certainly more problematic than what you're talking about, but it feels like we're crossing a threshold where you're giving the control of a device over to the patient. What goes into that design process and into that thought process? What sort of safeguards do you have to consider? It just seems like a whole new dimension of design development.
Yeah, it is the short answer.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of things that are required to do it successfully. And, I'd say the first comes back to the DNA of the organization. The DNA of the organization has to be ready to truly design for users, to meet those requirements of both safety and ease of use simultaneously, giving up on neither, which is a challenge. And the second is a whole bunch of capabilities that are kind of new to medtech. As we think about the convergence of consumer tech and medtech, there are a bunch of tools that our consumer tech peers have learned and refined over the last 20 years that medtech now has to borrow and adopt in order to create really elegant user interfaces that are going to be easily understood, easily adopted, and not confusing to users. And so, when we think about it, we're fortunate. We started with the DNA, right? It's been in Insulet's DNA for 20 years to assure that we were going to develop an easy-to-use device that reduces burden. And then we made an enormous investment in capabilities in order to study user behavior and understand if Tom picks up this device, how do we make sure he's not going to give himself twice as much insulin as he needs?
Is that because I screwed up in the laptop? Is that why you're bringing that up?
No judgment in this conversation, Tom. But yeah, look, we all make mistakes with technology, right? But in our case, when those mistakes happen, there are health consequences. And so, we invest probably dramatically more than folks who aren't operating at the user interface, meaning the end user, the same way that we are. We invest dramatically in understanding user behavior, human factors engineering, design iteration. We test with hundreds of users. We go through tens of design iterations on every element of our design. And we prepare to iterate as we go, which is all a little different than how kind of classic med tech innovation happens.
What does that engagement look like? You talked earlier about the LinkedIn comments. I think that's great, but that's obviously not what we're talking about. Do you have, talk to us a bit about the process of engaging patients in a systematic, measurable way so you can walk away with the information and data that you need?
Yeah, it happens actually all through the design lifecycle. If you think about, we do very early user research where we'll produce sketches of here's how we think this thing is going to work, and we'll go find people with diabetes and see how they react to sketch 1 versus sketch 2 and 3. Then we'll refine those, and we'll actually build out a user interface and build, sort of looks like prototypes, and go test those with tens of users to begin to understand user behavior in the technology that we're making. We'll then commit many more resources to actually develop those into a usable product and continue to do, more formalized human factors testing, again, on each element of the user interface. And, that's the sort of process side to it. But the culture side to it and the DNA side to it is, if you think about a product development effort, there are almost always forces that want to add to a product. There are marketers who have great ideas, there's feedback from consumers, there's people writing to me on LinkedIn who are asking why they don't have this feature yet. There are all these forces that want to add. And culturally, you just have to have a very clear vision that the answer is less is more, right? What people want is the device to do the job for them. And so we keep iterating, and we keep, frankly, removing things until we have the simplest to use device that meets all of the requirements, that nobody's going to get confused, and therefore nobody's going to hurt themselves.
How do the engineering teams interact with that information or with the data? I guess I've imagined in devices that engineers would very much work by themselves as a team, but without sort of direct input from users, be it surgeons or physicians or patients. Are the engineers at Insulet, do they have a direct connection to the patients themselves, or are they just seeing data? And how do you ensure, I'm sure they just want to do a good job, but it must be challenging to have an idea that you're working on as an engineer and then have this input of data coming here that makes you change your mind and you're sort of how do you ensure that they work smoothly with the input that's coming from those studies?
A big part of it is actually simulated use. And again, I think this is somewhat unique in products like ours, but most of our engineers wear the product over the course of development. And they see when things work better or less well, they experience it. And that's it's a huge help in providing empathy to what users are going to experience. It's a huge part in just understanding the design that they're working on. And it's a huge part of providing context for the sort of data that you're describing. So, that's probably the single most important thing that we do is very early in development, we'll get an integration of the device together, and our engineers and our product teams will wear it and begin, experiencing what works, what doesn't, what do we need to refine. And we'll do that, as many as half a dozen times through a device iteration with different, chunks of functionality that are kind of ready to go. The other thing is, we look for opportunities for our teams to go connect with the community. We've had folks go to camps, we've had folks go to children with diabetes in order to get the appreciation for what it's like to live with diabetes. And our teams actually really appreciate the opportunity to do that, again, sort of coming back to our mission. So both of those are more important than one might think in helping the whole team get their head around what it is that we're trying to do. The other thing that's unique and has been really fun to see with Omnipod 5, with Omnipod 5, we get data pushed to our cloud every 5 minutes from the device. So we get a huge amount of insight into both user behavior and how well the system is working from a therapy perspective that we're able to learn in real time, just like consumer tech companies. And again, that's something that's sort of brand new in medtech too, is the ability to learn not just in the micro by studying user behavior, but learn in the macro by absorbing large volumes of data and preparing for future iterations of the product that are going to be even better. So we do all of those in order to keep refining our devices.
What does that data look like that's going to the cloud? Is it a measurement of levels within the patient? Do you have some capacity to also measure behavior at the time, what they're doing, what their activities were?
Yeah, so we have the basic therapy and information. That data is critical because we actually develop digital products that we serve that data back to users. Again, this whole concept of burden, one of the burdens that parents in particular live with diabetes is that they're very uncomfortable sending their child with diabetes into new environments.
Sure.
Even school can be a very scary place for a parent of a child with diabetes. And so, we've developed a companion app, what we call our View app, which provides real-time data to authorized caregivers to see what's happening on a user's AID system. And that product's been on the market for a couple of years with Omnipod Dash, with Omnipod 5, because every controller has a SIM card in it, the utility of that will go up significantly. So that's one thing we're able to do with the data that's coming back, is provide visibility back to loved ones. The other, we do actually also get a fair amount of insight into user behavior with the device, and so we're able to therefore improve the device, and our engineering teams are constantly analyzing that data to figure out how we're going to make Omnipod 6 even better than Omnipod 5.
Do you internally do you see your Omnipod 5 and future iterations as a medical device or something else?
They are medical devices. They are also consumer devices.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, we live at the intersection of those two things. And as we've talked about throughout this conversation, diabetes is such a personal experience that the choice ultimately, it's influenced by the care team around the person with diabetes, but the ultimate choice is made by the person with diabetes and their family. And and so that's sort of central to how we think about it.
Interesting. So your primary focus, I believe, has been on type 1, but you're moving more into type 2. How different are those two populations, and how different is your approach to reach them?
Yeah, we've had, it's a great question. The short answer is, as I said, at the beginning of the conversation, there are about 2 million folks in the U.S. who live with type 1 diabetes, and about 2 million folks in the U.S. who live with insulin-intensive type 2 diabetes. And so we see it as a real opportunity. And I think, like most great innovations, our interest in type 2 diabetes sparked with just a very genuine market insight, which is that we had feedback from the field that folks were prescribing Omnipod, and this predates Omnipod Dash. This is our original Omnipod. Folks were prescribing it for folks with type 2 diabetes and getting great outcomes. And so, we saw a few of these, and we took the insights back and said, oh, that's really interesting. We began to learn more, and so we actually did the work, all the design work that I was describing for Omnipod Dash to assure that it would be ready for type 2 diabetes. Today, about 35 to 40% of our new users are folks who live with type 2 diabetes, and that's because we have terrific access. The products.
What was that number again?
35 to 40% of our new users are folks with type 2 diabetes. And it's for a handful of reasons. The product works really well. Folks with insulin-intensive diabetes, they need insulin, just like folks with type 1 diabetes, and they're looking for a solution that doesn't add burden to their life. So, what they don't want to do is go take 3 to 5 shots a day. What they don't want to do is go, wear a belt-worn pump and have a tube attached to them. But they do want an elegant solution like Omnipod that's going to get them the insulin they need so that they feel better. And so we've actually had terrific success with Omnipod Dash. The outcomes, we published real-world evidence on the outcomes, which are terrific with Omnipod Dash. And we recently, just at ATTD a couple of weeks ago, published very strong preliminary data on Omnipod 5 in folks with type 2 diabetes, which again has us incredibly excited about bringing Omnipod 5 to that population too. I was just to say, look, the last thing I'll add, it's a funny case back to the design point where we actually learned a lot about building simpler devices by designing for folks who live with type 2 diabetes. I think what had happened to some extent in type 1 diabetes is folks don't have a choice. Everybody who lives with type 1 diabetes must get insulin. And so the products were a little complicated for a long time. Omnipod, a bit of an exception, but in general, insulin delivery products were a little complicated. When we started working on type 2, we had this incredible focus on simplicity. And what we learned is that helps. Everybody who lives with type 1 diabetes wants the same thing.
Do the folks who treat people with type 1 diabetes also treat type 2, or do you have to go after primary care patients? How do you let patients know, or potential patients know, or customers know, or users know, or podders know of Omnipod?
It's a bit of a mix. There are more folks who live with type 2 diabetes that are treated by primary care, whereas the preponderance of folks with type 1 diabetes are treated by endos or diabetologists. You may know we do quite significant direct-to-consumer advertising. Again, another of the ways in which we're both a consumer product and a med tech product. And a lot of the folks who've learned about Omnipod and gotten started on it are folks who learned about it through our direct-to-consumer advertising, saw it and thought, that's going to change my life, and went and found us. And that's been happening and accelerating for the last couple of years. And it's working.
I don't think we talked about this in our call last week, but what is the reimbursement situation like for Omnipod, and how active is Insulet in helping patients get that?
Yeah, it's been increasing. Both access and awareness has been a huge focus for Insulet. We have terrific coverage, and it's actually one of the reasons that we've had so much success in type 2. That 35 to 40% of new users that I described is that we have coverage for nearly everybody. There are pretty few functional barriers to access in the pathway because of the pharmacy channel. So again, somewhat unique about our product relative to others is it's pay as you go. We will give folks a 30-day trial that they can try the product, and if it works for them, then they can go to their pharmacy, get a script, and keep using it for as long as it works for them. And in general, the out-of-pocket costs for that are very low, something similar to multiple daily injections, which would be the alternative.
What are the sources of innovation for new iterations of Omnipod, and how far out do you have this mapped? Are you set for the next 5 years, or is it put one out, collect data, put the next one out, collect data, and so on?
Yeah, there's a fair amount that we're going to do to Omnipod 5, and then we certainly have line of sight to what's coming thereafter. So in terms of expanding the Omnipod 5 platform, today we're partnered with our partner Dexcom's terrific G6 continuous glucose monitor. We've already spoken about our efforts that are underway to connect Omnipod 5 to both Dexcom's next generation G7 sensor and Abbott's Freestyle Libre platform, which are critical programs to help ensure the broadest possible adoption of Omnipod 5. We'll be bringing Omnipod 5 to the globe, which is an exciting opportunity for us. And we're also going to be doing a huge amount of work to ensure that as many smartphones are compatible with Omnipod 5 as possible, so that everybody has the magic of a fully smartphone-controlled device. In addition, we spoke about the View app. There are also a number of things that we can do in providing data and insights back to users to help take some of the other burden off of living with diabetes. And so we'll be building around the platform in that regard too. So we see, a huge amount that we can build on Omnipod 5 from a platform perspective. As we look beyond Omnipod 5, there's really, it's not that complicated. There's sort of two dimensions of things that people really care about from an innovation perspective in products like ours. They care about the physical experience, in which Omnipod stands unique as the only pod-based insulin delivery system. And they care about how easy the experience is, which is dominated by the amount of automation that the experience provides, but also just how easy it is to get started, how easy it is to maintain, that sort of stuff. And so, we think about those as the two primary drivers, right? How do we keep improving the physical experience, and how do we keep enhancing, meaning reducing what users have to do to live with diabetes? And the incredible thing is, as transformative as Omnipod 5 is, we see, at least a decade of transformative innovation ahead of us. And the reason for that is we're only at about a third of folks who have adopted technology like Omnipod. And we're going to keep driving the automation. We're going to keep improving the form factor, and we've got a long way to go to help everybody find a fully automated system.
So as you're moving out to connect Omnipod to the different cell phone platforms and such, I'm curious as to what's the profile of the engineers you're looking to hire? Are they coming from the medical device industry, or are you drawing just as much from cell phone companies or other tech companies? Where do folks come to Insulet from?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. We've built an innovation center in Southern California and more recently actually in Mexico that has a world-class team of hundreds of software engineers. These are folks whose other jobs would be Google, Apple, Indeed, LinkedIn, it's all the companies that you'd think of. And, we're fortunate we've attracted a spectacular team. And it's our mission that helps us do that. These are folks whose normal career path, might be thinking about something else, but we introduce them to Omnipod and Insulet and what it is that we do and the opportunity to change lives. And they're really excited to come work on very hard problems. It's also, there are interesting practical considerations associated with putting those talents together. In general, those folks have not worked in safety critical environments. There's a certain amount of work we do to help them get used to that. But it's been, a really fun journey to, bring true tech culture, tech capabilities into Insulet and see it thrive.
Have you had trouble drawing talent?
Look, it's a really competitive talent marketplace. We have not had trouble. We have such a compelling value proposition and such a strong mission that actually people love coming to work for Insulet. We have attracted talent from just about everywhere and kept terrific talent despite the challenges of the last couple of years.
Great. I wanted to explore your title a bit. So you're Executive Vice President of Innovation Strategy and Digital Products. We just named that 2 months ago, March?
Yeah.
What is that Innovation Strategy and Digital Products? 3 big words.
Yeah.
What is your focus and what are you in charge of?
Yeah, so I lead product development, strategy and corporate development, and our business unit that builds digital products and thinks about how broad-based digitization in healthcare is changing business models and how that might affect Insulet.
And what do you see happening in that last part? Because that sounds really interesting. They all do, but.
Yeah, look, when we think about digital transformation affecting medtech, we think about three big categories, right? It's personalization of therapy. We've talked a lot about that already with Omnipod 5. Omnipod 5 is true personalized medicine. It's data and what can be learned from data, how data can improve technologies, and how data and insights can be provided back to users to reduce burden and improve care. We've talked a lot about how Omnipod 5 is doing that too. The business model piece we haven't actually talked about, but it's happening already and happening everywhere. Some of it is happening now, and there are in big ways, and some of it we're just seeing the start of. The parts that we've seen already are the digitization and transformation of core business operations that would have been done one way and that are now done digitally. So, we train everybody who starts on our products, for example, and until 3-ish years ago, that meant we had to have somebody physically go meet every one of our new users in order to train them on the product. We now do that through a digital pathway, with the impact being functional access has improved, because somebody who wants Omnipod somewhere that is nowhere close to one of our trainers can get it, and they can jump on a Zoom call and we can teach them how to use Omnipod very successfully. With Omnipod 5, we've transitioned to automatic self-serve benefits checks, where people can actually go check their benefits online and in many cases get started on Omnipod if they're current users via an entirely digital pathway. And so, we're already seeing some of the core elements of our business and medtech businesses like ours be transformed. As we look ahead, we see some other forces that will have longer-term implications. You see telehealth becoming another way that folks are going to get access to care in places that they might not have had it. We talked earlier about access and awareness. In the case of diabetes, 10 years ago, if you weren't near a world-class center, you didn't have access to the best technology. And telehealth is actually a way to improve functional access so that everybody who wants technology like Omnipod can get it. And we see also programs popping up, leveraging telehealth and other digital tools to improve access and get technologies like Omnipod into the hands of people who really need them. And that's what we think about, is what that future looks like and how we assure that we're positioning ourselves to make Omnipod available to everybody who needs it.
Is Insulet a diabetes product company only, or do you see yourself being more than that? Is this a platform that you can build on and move into other areas?
It absolutely is a platform that we can build on and move into other areas. You may know that we have a business leveraging our platform to deliver other drugs. The largest of which is partnered with Amgen to deliver their drug Neulasta. Right. And so it is, definitely a platform that we will build on. And if you zoom way out, Omnipod 5 is a microcosm of what we think the world is going to look like 20 or 30 years from now, of true personalized delivery for a range of drugs in response to biomarkers that are detected via novel sensors and to get therapy just right.
Fantastic. Great. I did not know that, so I'm glad you told me that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would not have asked that question. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Eric Benjamin, thank you for joining us.
Tom, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great.
In this segment, we just kind of wanted, as we noted throughout, there were things that didn't necessarily make news articles, but were interesting points nonetheless. So Danielle, why don't you start us off? Any one or two takeaways from panels that you were in or participated in that you want to share with our listeners?
Sure. One of the panels that I sat in on was creating a broader representation for in clinical trials. And that was really interesting because, as we know, I'm really into diversity with women in medtech, but the panelists were really informative. Dr. Paul Underwood from Boston Scientific and Jennifer Doyle from Medtronic gave interesting tidbits about how there needs to be representation from not only all races, but all genders, all disability awareness, sexual orientation, and just kind of how they're progressing into that. And then The other panel was the one that I moderated, the single-use endoscope panel.
Did a great job.
Thank you. Had just a really good conversation. They made some good points about reusable scopes that I hadn't taken into consideration before, like the cost that it takes to clean the reusable scope. So that was probably the one thing that I didn't take into consideration. So it was really informative, and I really liked all of the sessions. I wish I could talk about all of them, but it was really fun.
Yeah,
it was a good
great.
show.
No, I think that panel, the single-use panel, included Dave Carey of Pristine Surgical, Dr. Kapil Gupta of Boston Scientific. He's Senior Medical Director of Medical Affairs of Endoscopy at Boston Scientific. And we were pleased to have Wes Scruggs, VP of Corporate Accounts, on the panel as well. He filled in for the original panelist who had fortunately fallen ill with a respiratory illness, not COVID, but couldn't make the trip nonetheless. So it was definitely, as I said in the opening when I kind of kicked the session off and handed it off to you, it was single scope has been probably one of our first more popular podcasts, and it's been a very popular topic on Device Talks Tuesdays. So certainly delivered at Device Talks Boston as well. So good picks. Sean, what about you? What was your takeaway?
Yeah, I got to sit in on the How Boston Scientific Uses Clinical Feedback to Advance Innovation panel with Megan Scanlon, who I know has been on the podcast, and Jenny Lee. And it was really an interesting conversation. At one point, Megan Scanlon mentioned how McDonald's uses its bathrooms as a marketing ploy, essentially. Yeah, it was a story. She explained that they're situated in a place that the employees can't see you. So if you're on a road trip, you pull in, you don't feel the need to buy anything. You know they're clean because they take care of them. And then while you're in there, you think, maybe I'll just get a burger anyway, or a side of fries. And so I don't even remember what the question was that she'd answered, but that blew my mind. But so it was a really interesting conversation, and she talked about product development. She's the senior vice president of urology and pelvic health, and she was talking about sort of how she explained it. Don't etch your hypothesis at the beginning in stone tablets. She said use a pencil or an erasable marker. Constantly test and validate it. Don't let pursuit of perfection be the enemy of progress. All that. It was a really interesting conversation, and I learned a lot about how Boston Scientific goes about product development and advancing innovation is the title of the panel. So
That's great. No, that was one of the ones that I was had been hoping to sit in on.
They never knew that. You know what? Actually, I'm not surprised that McDonald's does that with the bathrooms. They seem like
I thought I was sticking it to the man. Now I've been manipulated by corporate America once again.
That's right.
It was. I felt like the top of my head was exploding off when I heard that. I wonder if everyone else in the room already knew that, or I was the only one. But it was quite interesting.
We were all duped. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Chris Newmarker, what was your kind of favorite takeaways?
Well, I've just got to mention the panel that I moderated at the conference, which was the pulsed field ablation panel. I mean, we had top executives from from Boston Scientific, Medtronic, and Acutus Medical on that panel, and I definitely learned something. I mean, it seems like there's just a lot of potential around that technology, especially because it's like a non-thermal method of cardiac ablation, that it can affect like that, cardiac muscle tissue is especially susceptible to, but not tissue around. So it can provide a much more targeted therapy. I appreciated, the honesty of the panelists that as far as figuring out the right recipe for it, I mean, there's a lot of variables around delivering it. There's still a lot of research to be done to figure out how to do it exactly right. And, how effective it could actually be. But, need to talk about technology that just sounds like it have a lot of, potential, and frankly, better treatments for AFib are extremely important, not just because of the symptoms that you can experience having it, but, there's also the higher risk of stroke that you can have from AFib. So, here's to hoping that this type of technology can, reduce the amount of, strokes we have.
That's terrific. And that featured,
Dr. Kenneth Stein, who's a CMO at Boston Scientific, Dr. Khaldoon Tarachi, from Medtronic, and Dr. Stephen Michelson at Acutus Medical. So just some real top doctors, top researchers really in that space. People have been really furthering cardiac treatments. Just a real honor to moderate a panel with that kind of expertise up there.
Yeah, this was definitely one of those discussions that was born from the podcast. We had Dr. Stein and Dr. Mickelson on the podcast last year, and it was Dr. Stein who initially suggested having this at one of our conferences. So great to bring sort of those discussions from the podcast to literally to life. So fantastic. Well, my pick goes to the Abbott panel that I had the opportunity to sit in on. It featured Dr. Christina Vanderplume of Boston Children's Hospital. She's a pediatric cardiologist. Chris Cotter, who's a principal engineer at Abbott. Chad Digg, a staff engineer at Abbott, and Katie Frazier, who is a staff strategist, special population, and global medical affairs at Abbott. And finally, it was moderated by Kevin Bork, vice president of research and development at Abbott. And Kevin actually sat on a panel the next day as well. So we appreciate his doing double duty. But within that conversation, there was a lot of discussion about HeartMate, about where it's headed, of course, as the title indicated. But I really found Dr. Vanderplume's comments as to it would be great to get to a point where she was speaking actually about the opportunity for device companies to create valves for pediatric patients who still need device assistance with their hearts as they get older. And there needs to be more devices there. But she was also speaking to, it would be great to someday have the ability for, like you do with an insulin delivery device, to allow users of these LVADs to control the level of blood flow. So if they're doing something that requires a little more work for the heart, they can kind of tick it up or tick it down. And she had actually talked about a study she was doing with some young man, some teenager who was walking on a treadmill and was having difficulty. And he asked if she could basically give him a little more juice, and she did, and it helped. So that would be a great way to go to help these people live. These folks who are using these devices live more complete lives. And in the conversation I had with Kevin Bork the next day, where I talked with heads of R&D at DePuy and Medtronic and Abbott, it was Tom Gamache from DePuy, who's senior director of R&D, and Bill Pine, engineering director of surgical robotics at Medtronic. And when Kevin Bork confirmed that is certainly a place they would like to go, kind of create almost a device that allows patients to really have more control over their LVAD. So exciting stuff for MedTech. All right, well, this is all great stuff. I hope we did the best we could, I think, to get people caught up on what went on. Once again, if you weren't there, you missed much more. So next year, set aside May 10th and 11th. Make sure you're in DeviceTalks Boston. Even if you're not in the Boston area, I do think, I think Amanda DePalma for her comment about missing out, but I think a lot of people missed out. So hopefully this will become a national event going forward. That's certainly where we'd like to see it, right? Thanks everybody for your work at the conference and before the conference, and look forward to doing this again at a future conference.
Tom, congrats on what you've created with this conference. I mean, it's just outstanding, and I just feel just honored to be a part of this, and it's just so exciting to have this just have this awesome team, and I'm just getting so much feedback. I think we're providing some real value for the industry, like really helping people network and stay informed, and hopefully advance innovation, hopefully help people's lives.
That's
seconded.
Oh, very kind. Thank you, guys. I wasn't fishing for that, but I'll accept it. All right. Well, that is a wrap. It's great to have Eric Benjamin as a keynote speaker at the DeviceTalks Boston conference, and I hope you enjoyed my conversation with him. I certainly did. Now is the time, folks, when we tell everyone out there how to reach us on social media. Danielle Kirsch, why don't you go first?
You can find me on Twitter at Danielle_Kirsch, KIRSH, and same on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And Sean Hooley, where are you out there?
On Twitter, I am Sean, SEAN, Hooley, WHOOLEY, WTWH. That is my Twitter handle. And then Sean Hooley on LinkedIn. Please connect.
Absolutely. And Chris Newmarker, where can folks find you?
Chris Newmarker, just like a new marker. I'm on LinkedIn mostly, on Twitter a bit at Newmarker, but always happy to connect and chat and learn about new things.
Fantastic. All right.
And we have all of our sites.
Yes, please.
Mass Device, MDO. We got all the Device Talk stuff we're doing. So you got to like, follow, subscribe.
MDO being medical design and outsourcing, of course. And
medical
I know we gave him
a
shout out earlier, but Jim Hammerand was actually our guy in the command capsule. Didn't quite get on the moon, but he was up there doing all the important stuff that made the whole mission a success. So thanks to Jim Hammerand.
He had the lights on. He was sipping the coffee in the module. It's nice. Hoping we made it back.
And our farmer editor, Brian Bunce, kept the lights on as well during the week. So thanks to our colleagues. So, all right. Well, I'm on Twitter. I'm at MedTechTom. On LinkedIn, Tom, SALEMI. Please do share this podcast with your friends. Please do, Chris Newmarker.
Got to follow, subscribe.
That's right. Like, follow, and or subscribe to this podcast. If you've subscribed to this podcast channel, you'll also receive Stryker Talks and Intuitive Talks. But make sure you also subscribe to our Medtronic Talks podcast. All great content for you, all giving you insights on the medical device industry. And all of them basically are helping to strengthen our Device Talks meetings. That is a wrap. Thank you, folks, thank you to everyone who was at Device Talks Boston. Thank you to everyone listening to this podcast. And I hope we'll see you at a Device Talks event coming up in the near future.
Take care, everybody. Enjoy the summer.